Hello and welcome to PCG Live. In today's industry special episode, we look at freelancing in public relations and ask whether more PR specialists are choosing to go it alone, and if there's anything the industry can do to make it easier for them, and also what those individuals can do to make it easier for themselves. With me, David Brain, Sarah Pinch, the President-elect at the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, Louis Clark, the Public Relations Manager at PCG, and Jane Bowles, a PR and Public Affairs Consultant. Welcome, everyone. If you have any questions for the panel, please get in touch with us on Twitter using the hashtag PCGLive. Now, more and more people are going freelance across all industries. But is this true for PR?
Yes, actually, I think. I mean, our statistics say that spread is right across the board, and actually public relations is a particularly strong area for freelancing. It's an area that, it's part of the culture of that sector to freelance. It's an area I think that clients understand freelancing as a way of engaging with public relations people. It's always been part of the industry. So it's always been particularly strong, but it's seeing just as much of a rise as the other sectors. I mean, so we probably have specific statistics around that, but yeah, we see just as much of a rise there as everywhere else. It's part of the change in the way of working as a sector.
Absolutely. And Sarah, are you seeing that in the membership of CIPR?
So the CIPR represents around 10,000 members, in-house agency and freelancers, and about 800 of those are freelancers at the moment. What we're seeing is a need to provide particular support to that group of individuals. So we have a number of what we call sectoral groups. So if you work in corporate and financial PR, we have a group that meets and provides particular networking opportunities and training for people who work in that industry, and we're going to set up a network for freelancers so that they have those opportunities to network, to share ideas and to get the training that's specific to them.
What is it, you're probably best qualified to answer this question, what's the appeal? Why are more people choosing to go it alone?
I think flexibility is a major part, and the work-life balance. And a challenge as well, because often in freelancing you've actually got the opportunity to start a project, finish a project, and feel that you've a real sense of achievement. And freelancers obviously get the opportunity to work in different sectors and to move around, which also can be quite attractive. So I think that's mainly the challenge and flexibility.
Have you seen the flexibility in yourself?
Yeah.
From when you first started to now? Is your skill set just constantly widening because it has to?
Yes, I think so, and I think also the whole thing about PR is it covers a number of things. Obviously there's the whole media relations side of PR, but you've also got business development, marketing, all the other bits that sort of fit in. And obviously when you work in different organisations, they have different criteria, and people have different ideas about how the mix works within different organisations. So you get the opportunity to see different ways of how different organisations work.
Being a freelancer has its positives and its challenges, of course, in any industry. But in PR particularly, what are the biggest challenges that a PR would face? What are the biggest challenges that you face and that your members face?
I think the biggest challenge is to do the work, to do the project that you're working on, and at the same time to be busy looking for the next project. Because that's one of the things that puts some people off, is that the idea that obviously it can be slightly precarious. So you've got to have a sort of the right balance of doing the work, achieving what you've got to achieve for the client, and at the same time looking for new projects.
I think that's key from a public relations point of view. We know that our statistics tell us that as an industry, as a sector, the contract length for PR people is fairly short because it's project based. So whereas if you're freelancing in IT, where you're doing a very long project, it might take 3 years to roll out a new kind of IT system at a big bank, for example. PR campaigns, obviously it's all about impact, and they can be a lot shorter. So when you're talking about getting work, if you're working on lots of short-term contracts, you've always got to have something else. You can't think, oh, this is great, I've got a 3-month project going on, this is great work, I can relax and I can get into that. You've got to be thinking, well, what happens when that ends? I've got to also be looking to find the next contract and the next thing. So that's where clients are key, and having a balance of clients. I imagine having some on a retainer where you do sort of constant bits for them on a sort of short-term basis, and then some bigger campaigns. So getting that blend right is key for public relations, I suppose.
Would you say you're almost an agency, kind of in a shell? You're an agency, but you have to do all of those things for yourself.
Yep, I think that's very true. Because you also got the sort of administrative side of running yourself as you are the business, you are the brand. So you've got to be doing all that stuff as well as actually doing the work for the client. And often you get this balance where you're sort of time rich and cash poor, or cash rich and time poor. So it's getting that balance right. That's the challenge.
And what's the people not getting involved in this, not choosing to go it alone? Is there a fear factor? Because certainly there has to be a level of confidence in yourself and your own abilities to be able to go as a freelance PR professional. Is that what it is? Is there a lack of confidence? Is that what would stop someone getting involved?
Yeah, I think so. I think from our experience, I mean, the people that have done it and said, you know, it took me 5 years or 10 years to do so, and we say why, I mean, a lot of it will be a fear of the unknown. They simply don't know what they have to do. You know, other things they have to do to set up a business. You know, how do they do the right thing legally?
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously paying the right amount of taxes is a complicated thing, and you know, just all the other bits of setting up a business. You know, as you say, you have to do everything.
Yep.
And that's a lot of different stuff. Some of it's actually very simple, but only when you know.
Mm-hmm.
And other stuff is very complicated, and the advice possibly isn't out there for freelancers generally in terms of the government about what they should do and what they need to do in order to set up properly and do what they should. So it's that unknown. I mean, you know, it's a daunting thing, and a lot of people say that, you know, that held them back for quite a long time. Even the people that actually do end up doing it, it holds them back for a few years.
And that's the same if you're freelancing in whatever sector, not
Absolutely.
necessarily just, you know, PR, obviously.
But I think that's where organisations like the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, like PCG, come into their own, really, because they can provide that support, whether it's how to register for tax, you know, how to set up being a sole trader, or whether it's the networking and the upskilling. And I think one of the challenges Jane has talked about, running the business and delivering the business. I think one of the other challenges, which is not specific to freelancers, but I think brings its own issues, is that constant keeping your skills and your knowledge up to date. And obviously, if you work in a large team, inevitably there are going to be people within that team who've got those skills, and there's a lot of transference of those skills. But if you're an independent, then keeping those skills up to date is something more of a challenge. And I guess, you know, as the president-elect of the Chartered Institute, what we can offer is that continuous professional development and, you know, as I say, the networking, but also really enabling freelancers to have a unique proposition. So being a member of a Chartered Institute, being part of the only professional body for public relations that has a code of conduct under the Royal Charter, and that has a commitment to continuous professional development, where people have to undertake, you know, so many hours of continuous learning each year. So I think there are support networks out there. I think finding them can sometimes be a challenge, but that's where I think things like this become very helpful for people, hopefully.
Absolutely, yeah. You touched upon networking there. It's kind of an interesting thing I wanted to talk about. What is networking? It's a very broad question, but I think it's different for each person. What does it mean to you as an individual? What does it mean to you as a freelancer? What is networking?
Well, I think the key to networking is the follow-up. You know, you can go to as many networking events as you like, but you need to follow up and be pretty methodical about that, so that you keep in contact with people. I'm a great believer in that, you know, what goes around comes around. So keep in contact with people. If you find something that you think would be interesting to someone, you know, get in touch with them and try and, you know, pass things around. I mean, the Women's Freelance Network, which has been set up by PCG, had an event last night. And I was fascinated because most of the people in the room, well, quite a lot of the people in the room were involved in PR. It wasn't specifically for PR people. But some of the people, I was chatting to people about networking, and 2 or 3 of these women were quite shy about coming into a room full of people, but actually found it easier to come into a room full of women rather than a room full of men and women. Now, I know we're veering into something else, but it is interesting. I think, you know, I mean, my job today is I met 3 people yesterday from whom I could get some work, or who were interesting, who I think might be interested in things that I know about, and I must follow them up. You know, that's the key, follow up. So go, meet people, be yourself, have a business card. A number of people don't have a business card, unbelievable. Have a business card, but make sure you follow up.
And I think it's key to look at, you know, people talk about networking, like say, sort of, there's events for networking, there's formalised networking, which is great, and especially, I mean, I actually think a lot of the events that are specifically for women are doing a really good thing in that sector. It's actually very strong, and I think that maybe they, I don't know, I shouldn't say they do it better necessarily, but there seems to be more open to that. And I think there's that formalised networking, and that's really important, and it's great because everyone comes into the room and almost knows what they're doing there, and it's sort of accepted that that's what's going on. But then you also have the more informal style of networking, which is anybody you meet can give you work. I mean, you know, your neighbours, people you meet in business, people you meet, in the post office. Anybody can actually be. Everybody needs communications. Every business needs comms. Every business needs PR in some form or another. So bear that in mind. Don't just think, well, I'm going to a networking event next Thursday. That's where I do my networking. I just switch off till then. Everybody that you talk to can give you work, and that, especially when you're freelance, is really important because you always have to be thinking about that. So, it's bear in mind that networking means sort of a number of different things, and to always be thinking about it, I suppose, with everyone that you meet.
I think the most important thing to remember is networking without outcomes is socialising. And those are
Which
one,
is great.
and
but
one
not
should
for
never
work.
confuse the two. And I think we've all been to networking events where people have very much confused the two and are very clearly socialising when you're trying to network. I think there's some very interesting work being done by Professor Julia Hogsbourne at the CAS Business School. She's the first professor of networking. She brought out a white paper about the importance of networking for business, those softer business skills being really highly valued by some of the biggest businesses in the country, as well as freelancers and sole practitioners. So I think if anybody is unsure of how to start, I would commend some of that work to them. And I think, for me it is, there are moments when you meet up with friends and it is to socialise, and there are moments when you meet up with friends and contacts and everybody knows that it is to network. And I think that don't get drunk, remember people's names,
absolutely.
don't spend all night speaking to one person, make sure you've got business cards. I'm with Jane on that. The number of times you meet someone and say, here's my card, may I have yours? And they don't have one. I think that doesn't create a very good impression, David, really, because
you are your brand.
Absolutely.
And you've got to really be conscious of that and therefore behave in the right way. And as you say, sort of, constantly you are on show in effect. At a networking event, you have to behave in the right way.
I think networking now has been taken out of the physical realm to a certain extent as well. So you have a profile online. You're not just a person anymore, are you? You're constantly publicising yourself. That's a relatively recent phenomenon that's surely just helped freelancers.
Yeah, I would say so. And I think, especially in PR, when so much of it is based on relationships, and I think that's really important. So, but then people think that because of that, you should automatically be good at it, and there can be a stigma attached to it. I mean, if you're not necessarily, I always think that, remember that everyone's in the same boat as you. So if you go to a networking event, or if you're trying to get into social media or do anything like that, remember that everybody else is in the same boat. Everyone else is trying the same things. Don't be scared of it, and don't try and overcomplicate it. So, I think there's often a lot of thinking, I'm not so good at networking, I'm not great at talking to people. Well, I think everyone kind of has that fear, even if it's online. I mean, even if it's through social media, I think there's a lot of fear about what you might say, and rightly so. There's a lot of information out there and a lot of help, and actually CIPR do a lot of good stuff around that in terms of sort of the training around how to use it well. But don't be afraid of it. I think that's sort of an important thing, and get involved. The only way to learn really is to do it, is to get out there, and to start getting involved.
But also be careful about what you put on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was going to say, Jane, have you seen that change? What's it meant for you practically in terms
Well, I'm
of
very careful about what I put on there. No, well, I just think that is important because, you can inadvertently put something on or be opinionated about something. I mean, some of the work I do is in the political sector. I'm very careful about what I put, even on my Facebook with my friends or whatever. People are having a profile online from such an early age. Even youngsters who don't even know what they're going to do when they leave school or whatever. So I think you've just got to be conscious of that. I agree, though, you shouldn't be frightened. You've got to
but I think what's
have a go.
specific about to freelancing, it's quite interesting, is often when you see someone's Twitter profile, if they work for an organisation, they'll have a little caveat on there which just says, these views are my own, not of my employer.
Yeah.
We can't do that if you're a freelancer, because it's one and the same thing. So you can't, you don't even have that caveat. I can say what I want here because my employer doesn't agree with it. Which, if you're a freelancer, what you say out there is, like as you said earlier about the networking stuff, that you are your own brand. So you almost got to be even more careful than if you're an employee of somewhere where you can say, I can be out tweeting when I'm drunk because I've said it's not my employer, so that's fine. Really, if you're a freelancer, it's not the same thing. So
what does it mean in practical terms, this kind of thing? Again, just one quick question about the social media element of it all. Do you see it as more of a tool for your brand, as discussed, or do you see a return, let's be honest, in money? Does it turn into work, this stuff, or is it just to have that profile and be on that platform?
I think it can turn into money. I think it depends what you do. I mean, there are some examples of some big agencies who now employ somebody to go through LinkedIn to look for freelancers, potential employees. That's how they do their recruitment. And I think a lot of recruitment is now online. You know, the adverts that one used to find, you know, in the Guardian on a Monday, that doesn't happen anymore. They're all online. And I think therefore the connection between searching for jobs and cross-referencing into someone's online profile is very well versed. You know, I think, you know, big organisations, public sector organisations do, everybody's doing that. So I think it can translate into money. I think there are some very good examples of people who have very highly respected blogs, who might write something about a particular change in the industry or a new skill or a new approach, and then perhaps they might be asked to speak at a conference about that, and then that might translate into money. I think that being able to directly correlate between your Twitter feed and business, I would imagine, is slightly more difficult, but I think it's all about profile building, and I think if you see it as that, it's a little bit like what we were saying. If if you enter into the online world as fun, then it'll probably stay that way for you. If you enter into it saying, actually, I'm going to use this as a platform to build my profile, to say that actually I'm a particular expert in public affairs or marketing and communications, or I am the best annual report writer that you could ever need, then actually when someone's looking for that, they may come across you. I don't think it's a replacement for the face-to-face, but I think it's an additional and very valuable tool.
The key word there is expert. You know, that's what people come to freelancers for. They want an expert, and it's about building a convincing brand online that effectively backs that up. I mean, it works both ways. Someone could find you on Twitter. I mean, I suggest it's probably rare that someone will say, I want a PR expert. I'll go on Twitter and try and find one because it's just not the right vehicle for that.
But people are more and more putting out a tweet that says, we have a job, we're looking for a freelancer, using particular hashtags, and therefore I think the responsibility is on the freelancer to understand what to look for, what to monitor, how to use your
and then when you do
online
apply
monitoring.
for those jobs, or you do say, here's, here I am, I can do that. You've got to make sure that when the person that you've tweeted or got in contact on LinkedIn looks back at everything else you've done, everything you put out there builds that brand that gives you that expertise.
That's right.
So it's both ways, isn't it? You're backing up what you do, and then you're also getting the more direct element in there. It does both, and I think getting both of them right is important. But it's not about direct selling really. It's more subtle than that, I think. And I think having a blend of the personal and the professional on there is key, especially with things like Twitter, because people can go too far one way or the other and end up being either boring or completely mad. And I think having something in the middle is where you want to be, really.
You're running your own PR campaign, in effect. You're running your own PR campaign to get new work. Exactly. I'd say it's part of the mix.
There's an interesting comparison to be made with agencies and individuals, I think. What is it about an individual that is more appealing than an agency?
Well, I think there's room for both to start with. I think there's certain projects will be better for one, and certain clients will want more of one or the other. But I'd say always, if you're dealing with an independent professional compared to an agency, the person that does the pitch at the start will be the person you work with through the project, which is always really important. And isn't necessarily always the best, suggesting you should never work with agencies, of course. But I think that's very important. It'll be very important to certain clients that they'll value that, and I think that is really important. If Jane comes in and does a pitch, to run a campaign, Jane will be running the campaign all the way through. She's not going to hand that over to an account executive or someone else down the line. So that's a very strong sort of
which actually is a
selling
reason
point.
Sometimes that you want to become a freelancer, because you want to be the one who puts the pitch together, runs it through to the end. Whereas, as Louis says, if you're part of a larger agency, that's not always the case. So that's quite attractive as the freelancer.
Absolutely. And do you think PR agencies are more and more engaging with freelancers, with PR freelancers? Are they more attractive now?
Well, I think the concept is more widely understood and accepted, and I think it should be in PR because I think it's so project-based. You can scale your resource up and down. And if you're an agency, you get in a great big client, but you've only got them on a 3-month project. You might not want to invest in a new permanent account team for that project because it might not end up being a long-term arrangement with the client. It might be a really successful 3-month project, so it might not come back, which is where you bring in freelancers perhaps to deliver that project. And then if that client ends up being really pleased with what you've done, which you'd hope they would be, then you think, well, that could become a longer-term arrangement. That's when you bring your permanent staff in. So it's about as it is in a lot of industries, growth without risk or with mitigated risk. You bring your freelancers in to help you deliver those projects, and make sure it works. If it does and your relationship's good, away you go. You can build in a permanent team to deal with that client. So that's just one way you could work with agencies. And I think they are using them more and more, especially upscaling and downscaling on those big projects.
Yeah.
And to supplement existing teams too.
And I think also in the pitch process, so if you've got an agency that's pitching for a piece of work that perhaps it doesn't have that depth of understanding, goes back to Louis' point about an expert. So, you know, if you're putting a pitch together and it's for, let's say, an energy provider, and you don't have someone who's got that detailed knowledge of that sector, you might bring a freelancer in to help you write that pitch, and perhaps even to be part of the team that goes to pitch. I think from an in-house perspective, you know, having been a director of comms in-house for a number of years, I would sometimes supplement my own team with a freelancer, and actually they very quickly become part of your team, either on a particular project or for a period of time to fill a gap that you've got. Perhaps you've got a particular emphasis. So when I was working for the NHS, we had a particular issue that my deputy had to cover, which left a gap in the team. So we got a freelancer in for 4 months, and they became part of the team. It wasn't like having an arm's length off-site support.
Yeah.
It was right where you needed it, when you needed it. And also I think you get a commitment from somebody who's coming in for a short period of time that perhaps you don't always get if you were to recruit a permanent member of staff. So I think in terms of the sort of commitment, the resilience, the breadth of experience, freelancers can bring an awful lot into a team.
Because they want to deliver, because their last project is, you know, their next piece of work.
They're
as it
only
were,
as good as
is
their
that
last
project.
project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So consequently they want to deliver. So that, and also you can choose people who are very specific to your needs.
Yes, yes.
So, you know, from a media relations point of view, you would choose a freelancer who has particular contacts in the sector that you're working, or you know, the way in which the project is going, and the kind of people you need. So that's a plus as well.
Yeah, from what I can see, that the ability, the practical ability for a freelance PR to walk into an agency or an organisation and immediately fit in. It's a social skill. I think. Is that right? Would you say?
Yes, very much so. And I think that that's where this sort of expertise thing comes into its own. You know, that there are freelancers who specialise in particular sectors, and so they understand. You know, they know what's going on currently. They know what the big issues are, both for that organisation and in the particular arena that it's working, be that financial or healthcare or energy or whatever it is, education, and they can do that. But I think you're right. I think freelancers have an ability to make you feel confident in their abilities.
Yes.
And I think that is very important, very important.
I think an area of a type of business that maybe has a little bit more to learn perhaps is the SME sector. I think they are probably less likely to bring in an expert, a freelancer. They'd be more likely perhaps, if they've got a certain amount of budget to spend on PR/marketing comms, they might say, well, you know, got maybe £20,000-25,000 to spend, we might bring in a marketing assistant to be in the office all the time and deliver, which is great. They can do some things, but they'll be there all the time as a permanent member of staff, and they'll be effective to a certain level. But I always think, well, if I had £20,000 to spend in a year, I think, well, could I spend it on that, or might I bring in a very, very experienced freelancer for, you know, maybe a day a week for a year, or on a month or 2 month or 3 month project where they would give you really big impact for that shorter amount of time, but they'd really leave you with something lasting, which would build your business and grow your business, which is after all the point. So I think that for SMEs, I mean, there's an education there, and PCG's, you know, as a part of delivering that sort of education, that, you know, sometimes bringing in an expert on a shorter period of time gives you more bang for your buck, to use a cliche, than maybe just having a permanent member of staff there that can deliver to a certain level but doesn't give you that real impact that someone with a bit more experience could do.
And particularly in the communications sector, because you come with an address book. So
Well,
actually that
yeah.
can often be very useful for a client. I mean, you know, my point about the media and your media contacts in a specific area, you know, it's the same in whatever, you know, it might not just be your media contacts, it might be something that develops their business. So that's often quite attractive.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Talking now more specifically about the industry as a whole, and it's potentially quite a difficult question to answer, but what can the industry do better to accommodate freelancers? Is there an easy way to do that, or is it a much bigger job?
I think from the CIPR's perspective, that's one of the things that we want to ask freelancers, is rather than say this is what we think you need, is we want to ask freelancers. So we're going to get a group of freelancers together later in August and say, what do you want from us? How can we support you? You know, here's all these different groups that we have, regional groups, national groups, sectoral groups with specialist interest. We'll get a network of freelancers going, but then it's what are those needs? I think there may be something around this business development skills as well as keeping their own skills up to date. And I think that's something that that the CIPR can offer, perhaps in conjunction with PCG. I think there are, I think organisations are always much better at asking the people who they're trying to help what that help looks like, rather than putting a package together and then trying to sort of launch it. So.
And well, freelancers are free spirits too, so I'm sure you'll get some good feedback. But actually, it's really positive that the CIPR are doing that, because it actually recognises that there are a group of us out there who are working as freelancers. And okay, we may have interest in some of those other sector groups, but primarily we are freelancing in different areas. So that's really positive.
I always think freelancers need the sort of things that an organisation like CIPR or PCG can offer more than someone that's got a permanent job, because they need the networking elements of it. They need those, and they need the support structure that maybe you might not get from, you would get from your employer. So I think those organisations almost, I would see them as or CIPR a natural home for freelancers, because they need the stuff that you offer so much more. And I think, like you say, it's about asking what their pain points are, what's hurting them. We can, people are very good at telling you what they do really well, I think, and what's working really well, because that's what you want to do. And especially if you're independent, you want to appear like you're successful, because that's how you get more work, that's how you are. But finding out what people's pain is, that's really important bit, because that's where you can help them get
and
on.
I think hopefully from the freelancer's point of view, it's also about becoming part of a professional community, and then part of a learning community. So being able to learn those skills, to be able to, and I think in a safe environment actually, to be able to say to people in the same boat as you, actually, I don't really understand X, which you wouldn't want to share with a client. You wouldn't really want to, put out there on social media, can anybody help me understand this? Because of you going back to the brand issue and the profile that you're trying to keep. But hopefully by creating that kind of learning community for freelancers, there will be more opportunity for them to benefit from their membership and to feel stronger, and ultimately to get more business, because that's what it's all about. It's about how can we as a professional body help people be more successful.
And that's the whole thing around referral, and the fact that you might be in on a project, and then, as you said before, you might have something missing on the team, and you're actually in as a freelancer with an organisation, and you say, you're at a networking event or whatever, or you've got your network that you've created from your CIPR or PCG events, and you say, I know somebody who could help you with that. So there again, you are picking up work. So I think that's a very important
And
part.
that's helping your clients as well.
Absolutely.
Because they know that you're the person that they can come to for a
Fix
range
it.
of stuff. Not just your core skill set. You can say, I know you're going to say, I know someone that can do that.
Exactly. That's
you become,
really attractive.
you become.
Yes.
I think that's important.
Yes.
I also think it's important what the CIPR are doing in terms of giving public relations more of a sort of a legitimacy and the code of practice stuff, especially, because I think what we see other sectors where freelancers operate. I mean, if you're in IT, if you're maybe doing JavaScript or something, that's something it's tangible. You can say, I can do that to a certain level. That's something a client can understand. Whereas for public relations, it's a bit more of a nebulous concept. It's hard to say. It's harder to prove your expertise in that area. And I think what CIPR are doing with the training side of things, and also with the code of practice stuff, so you can say, this is how I operate, this is professional, this is what I do, I have letters after my name. I think that's really important.
And also, I think the code of conduct has within it, fair and equitable ways of doing business. So if you are a SME or a big agency or an in-house team and you're looking to employ someone, if you employ a member of the Chartered Institute and they do something, they write something or they put something out without permission, or indeed they don't come to work, there are repercussions for that. You have somewhere to go. And similarly for freelancers, if they're employed by someone who's a member of the Institute and they don't pay them on time, or they don't pay them, actually there's also come back there. So it's not a nice to have code of conduct that you stick on the wall and doesn't that look pretty. Actually, people can and do use it to protect themselves and to protect their organisations.
Fantastic. And finally, guys, because we are running out of time, I just noticed, unfortunately, just from each of you, somebody's watching this now, they're in-house or they're at an agency and they've been considering going freelance for a while, but have never quite, for whatever reason, done it. What would your advice be to them?
I think do your research, speak to people like Jane who do it, find out what the pros and cons are, and be prepared. I think the legal things are things that Louis talked about right at the beginning. You know, make sure you can be employed, make sure you've got a contract, make sure you've got a bank account, make sure you've got a business card, have all those things set up, and I think be as prepared as you possibly can be to enter that new market.
Okay.
Well, join PCG, obviously. But I mean,
And the CIPR.
yeah. But first, no, yeah. I mean, what I mean by that is ask people. Really, I mean, there are lots of people out there that are doing it, and they will all tell you what they did wrong. You know, there will be things
Yes.
across, and that's what you need to learn. You need to learn. Let them make the mistakes. You'll still make your own mistakes, but ask people that have done it. You know, ask people that have done it and have experience. You know, there are loads of people out there, and through PCG and through CIPR. You know, they're there. They've made the mistakes. Let them tell you what they did, and learn from them. And then, you know, just be brave and go for it. I think that's what I'd say.
Be brave. Yes, well, that is very good advice. Be brave. I think probably the thing I would say is have something to get you started. So try and have that first contract. You know, whether that's an interim contract or whether it's a client you're going to operate from home or however you're going to operate, but actually have something to get you kicked off.
Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you to Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jane and Louis, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, you can catch up with previous episodes of PCG Live at our website, which is www.pcg.org.uk/PCG-live. Thank you and goodbye.